You know, the thing about it is me being judged as an African American, I had no business judging you guys. I mean, just looking at you, I would think these people know nothing. I said, they know more about African American history than most African Americans do. I'm really impressed. You know, we were doing those book studies. What I wanted to do, Robert was going to give you a little piece after me, and you have a lot of literature there. Basically, what I was going to do is kind of tell you a little bit how I was raised and give you a little bit of autobiographical background. I was born on the south side of Chicago in the early 50s. My mother and father bought into this neighborhood. It was a predominantly Irish-Italian neighborhood. Before I got to be about 4 or 5 years old, most of the whites had moved away. Capone's house actually was about 4 blocks. We stayed at 74th and Perry. His was on 72nd and Walton. He was long gone by then. And we used to ride by his house. So my mother passed away when I was 6, and I moved to New York with my grandmother. And so when I came back, now my father, mind you, outlived 7 wives. My mother was his 3rd wife. She passed away in 1960. I thought it was a Guinness World Book record, but it's not. Actually, it's another guy in India that married he outlived 13 wives. So, but anyway, so what happens is that when I come back, they put me on the train. You know, my grandmother, she was upset. She said, your father told me he was gonna let you stay with me until you got to be 12 years old. And so my mother passed away in 60, so he got married again in 61. This was my first stepmother. Her name was Dee. When I first saw her, I thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world. So she had all these toys, these Tonka toys and everything. And I guess it was through my father's marriage to her that I became conscious of race. Now, she worked for a rich Jewish family in Evanston called the Bernstein. To this day, I don't know what this guy did for a living. I do know he owned chunks of real estate in downtown Chicago. He owned part of the United Artists Theater. We could always go to the movies. But they were always movies. I used to go see Bye Bye Birdie, My Fair Lady, whereas other people in my neighborhood, they go on the hood movies, so to speak. So there was always this contrast, you know, and so I would always ask, she said, well, this is a world that you're gonna have to live in. You're gonna have to live in a white world, and so you're gonna have to understand how white people live and think. Now, this is how I was socialized. And at the same time, I was the darkest. My mother was very dark. My father was my grandmother actually was white. And so my father was a very fair-skinned man. And so even unfortunately in African-American families, there's this crazy discrimination against lighter children and darker children. So I was always, now this didn't happen when my mother was alive, but when my stepmother came along, I began to notice differences in how I was treated. I didn't know it at the time. I met which turned out to be my half-sister. I came back to Chicago from Albany, New York in 61. It was in March of 61. Very warm day. And I met who turned out to be my half-sister that night. My father told me years later, he was a mechanic by trade. Very brilliant man. He couldn't read or write. My mother showed him how to sign and write his name. He only had a 3rd grade education. He could calculate numbers in his head. My grandmother told me his hands were so fine they could run across a car and tell if it'd been in an accident. He could listen to a motor and tell you exactly what's wrong with it. He was very gifted in that area. Women loved him. So, yeah, obviously.
This the one with 7 wives?
7 wives. Yeah.
That's the story.
So what ended up happening is my father married, the woman's name was Dean. He married her sometime in the summer of 61. And me and my brother, he started the company. He's deceased now. He died from the virus in 86, 38 years old. My mother was 38 when she passed away. So me and my brother used to share a bedroom. And so one night, a man comes knocking on the door. And it was my stepmother's brother. His name was Uncle Didi. He was a member of the Communist Party. But he was a big influence on my life. I've never seen anybody live his life the way he did. He was a school teacher, could speak 3 languages fluently. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson was a very good friend of his. And he used to come to our house. And I used to always try to get him to sing, but he never would sing, you know. But he had this broad smile. I remember him even now, you know. And then all of a sudden, the talk centered around the white man, you know, and it was so strange because I understood that there were differences because they were still white families that had not moved out. There were two families, the Sullivans and the Kirkpatricks. They lived on the next block. They just never moved out of the neighborhood. And so I began to get this sense, you know, that there was something wrong with white people. You know, they used to always tell me, they said, well, get an education. Get an education because a white man can't take it from you. And so it was a lot of stuff I didn't understand because they would explain things, and I was never really taught to dislike or hate white people. But it was always this monolithic thought when I thought about white people being this big and holding force. And at the same time, I was always made to feel ashamed at being dark, you know. Never was gonna be nothing. Never, my father always told me, boy, you my smartest kid, but you ain't gonna never be nothing. You'll never amount to nothing. So I was always told this coming up. And so what happened is now this stepmother that I'm talking about, she passed away in January of '68. So my brother had went to New York. He was studying with the Dance Theater of Harlem under Alvin Ailey. He came back and started Joseph Holmes Dance Theater. You can still get some of his stuff on YouTube. So in his group, there was a guy, his name was Eric Young. He was a community activist and he was a captain on the south side of the Black Panther Party. And he was one of the founding members. And so I joined the Black Panther Party at 14 from dealing with him. So basically, I began to read and began to understand a little bit about how race and class intersected with each other. And because of my ill treatment in my own family, it sparked something in me about imbalances and injustices. And sometimes even now, I know this is a work of God. And so overall, ultimately, something that I really desire more than anything else is that we will all learn to work together and push past that divide that is so silly, that keeps us so divided as people. And so with that, I'm gonna let my man take over, and I want you guys to read through that. Now what we have is, we got some sign-up sheets. The problem we're having, Bill and Kathy came down where we're wrestling with these legislatures. We're trying to get these non-technical violations overturned. A lot of people go back to prison for something as simple, and I'm not kidding, for not failing to call their PO. And basically, what people don't understand is the middle class is the one that bears the tax burden of all this stuff. And so you don't really know what you're paying for because it's so costly. $42,000 to incarcerate a person. And they don't put that money into education like we should, or into treatment. A lot of these prisons double and are locked up or have drug addictions. And so we just think that just lock everybody up. We lock up more people than China, Russia, and all those places put together. So just kind of look at that, and then I'm gonna turn it over to my brother here. Good morning.
All right. Morning.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. The reason I sang that song is because it's time now that we do come together, as Philip said. A lot of things are happening right now. We're in a transition period of setting the captives free, if you will. I think it's a mandate as a believer that we come together despite denomination, right? Just because this is a call to true freedom, right? As Jesus set us free, we are those feet in the earth to those who are disenfranchised, right? To bring them to this freedom. Being incarcerated, and I have been incarcerated, federal system, state system. 2 years in the federal system, and probably 6 in the state, amassed total. Auto theft, I'll tell you, I have no problem. But again, once getting in the system, it doesn't let you go. As Philip was saying, the violations, these non-technical violations, failure to call your PO, drug testing. You're not committing any new crimes. That's what the parole probation system is about, to not create new crimes. Little things like being late to your PO, and they can violate you. Well, as a felon, when you become in the felony system, as a felon, housing is a problem. So say you get out of prison, go to a halfway house. They prepare you for society. So you get your apartment, right? You have to have a job, right? Well, when they violate you, you lose all that again. Okay? So there's this whole thing. So now you have to get back out. So it's the recidivism. And that actually feeds the beast, right? It's not so much new crimes committed or we be in big trouble. It's the recidivism. You're getting those who are repeat offenders for these non-technical violations, right? So this is what we're facing. This is what we are here about today, is this. How can we get the greater society, educate them, and then get them to where there's a commitment to say, hey, we have got to do something. We know the problem, it's the solution. What's the solution? The solution is those being cognizant, right? And saying, wait a minute, this is totally against what I believe, right? Look, educate yourself and be educated about it, but look at it. When you talk African Americans ages 18 to 24 are being incarcerated at a high rate, very high rate, right? If you go back in history, when they brought slaves over on the boats, who would guess what ages they were? That were sold off. 18 to 24. Right? As you go through history, there's a pattern. Right? Vietnam War, 18 to 20. African Americans. Right? There's this pattern that's always been ingrained in the system. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We got to get that out of the way. That's not, we're facing a system that has to be changed, and the only way to change it is to bring the system, the divine system, into this thing. We have to bring God into this thing. We are those Christs in the earth right now. We are his eyes, his feet, his ears, his mouth, right? And so when there's an injustice, just like Jesus did, he didn't have a problem addressing the injustices, right? We have to get over the things. I was talking to someone, the timidity. We've got to get over it, because God said, hey, look, I could do it like this, but that's not my job. He's given us the tools to do this. And so what we're here today about is to look at these injustices, right? And to begin to say, okay, talking is fine. It's time for action. One of the things that we're trying to do is work with the prisoners inside, as well as the families of the prisoners. How many people here have someone or know someone that's incarcerated or has been incarcerated? Friends, family, someone, right? It touches all of us. Believe it or not, whether it's the tax burden,
right? That's huge. I think it's what, how much is it, Phil? It's
$42,000.
$42,000 a year. Guess what happens in there? They sit there and do nothing. Oh, you're required to get your GED, you're required to do this, required to do that, okay. Right? But there's nothing else done. They don't prepare. I know, I was there. They really don't prepare us for the transition to the outside, to be or have good success. Right? Remember what Joshua was told? He said, the book of the law should not depart from your mouth, but you should meditate in it day and night and do according to all that is written therein, for then you will make your way prosperous and you will have good success. Not success, but good success. And I think that's where we come in. Right? It's preparing and helping prepare. Right? I think that, my opinion, that every church should have a prison ministry. Right? But we're actually preparing these men in the gospel of Jesus Christ. These men and women. Preparing, and this is part of that transition. If I don't have a church home, right? 9 times out of 10, my moral compass isn't right. We've got to have that. Right? And so as rebuilders of the wall or repairers of the breach, we have to do something. We are called, it's our duty as believers in the gospel to do something, to be active, to be engaged, right? So one of the things I believe we have that information of the
What this is like a sign-up sheet. And I want to point out, I don't want anybody to be motivated by guilt or anything like that. Bill can tell you, we was down there, tried to talk to these commissioners, they walked out on us, wouldn't even talk to us. And so we have to have people, what we like is that if you can sign up, we kind of would need people to like call their legislature. Once a week, we have like a scripted thing, we could put you on the email list and you just, hey, look, I'm in favor of all these non-technical violations being done away with. And so that's really the thrust of what we need now and then as we develop and grow. We need ideas, we need just brainstorming on how we can overcome this, because it is, you know, the scripture says we walk by faith and not by sight. Sometimes in looking at it, because the more you look at it, the deeper it goes, the deeper the sinister nature of how this whole thing works. And it's so cruel and evil. The big part of it is that the public, the common public, has no idea. We just kind of think, they're locked up, forgot what was coming to them. It's this laissez-faire type attitude that we take, not realizing, like we were talking with Michael earlier, we're all infected by this. Whites as well as blacks, everybody's infected. You can't get away from it. But sometimes, you know, when you're dealing with it on a different level, it just doesn't seem like we're tainted with this poison. But, you know, if we learn to come together, and overall, like I said before, what is really most important is that God looks at us and he looks proudly at people that decided not to let the silliness of skin color separate us, you know, to where we can walk forward in complete humanity. And that's what this is. So so anybody that wants to sign up, you know, and then we get your email address and we can kind of include you and then keep you up to date with what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So just if you would just, you know, keep in mind, and we would really, I'm talking to a lot more churches and the congregations about this. And what I'd like, and I believe what is happening is denominations need not. It's a humanity issue. It's not about what I believe and what my denomination. I grew up African Methodist Episcopalian. So I know them, you know.
I grew up as a Catholic.
That's okay, sorry about that. But I don't know the difference. So, you know, I mean, I just believe that that's part of that division and separation that's happening. Is we become, okay, my denomination, and this is not about that. This is really about humanity. This is about, I believe, that mandate for us, you know, to go and preach the gospel and to, you know, to set the captives free, to give them a voice, right? Behind bars, listen, it's sad what happens inside that prison system. You know, it's a system that from the beginning was not meant to be. Okay, we were talking about, Phil and I were talking about the other day, the Constitution, and how when that thing was written, how, you know, African Americans were slaves. So they really weren't included. So they make amendments to the Constitution, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, right? That's definitely stated there, right? But in fact, after they wrote that, they went back and beat slaves. So there was something that it wasn't so true. The words were there, the actions spoke differently, right? And so when justice is meted out, what you find, believe it or not, it's hidden, but you find that the very justice, when an African American and a white male come together, same crime, you should see the disparity of sentencing. It's crazy. You would not believe it, right? Well, getting exactly what the Constitution said. You're getting that action piece now. That makes sense? Now that action is coming forth, you were less than a man then, so you give you that justice. The court systems uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. The Constitution. Now, we say you amend amendments, okay, that's great. They have amendments, but if it was the truth needs no amendment.
Do you want to explain it? You can explain it better than me. I mean, if you don't want to, I can.
So, but that's it.
I'll jump in if you.
I just wanted, if you have questions or anything on anything, Phil and I'd be happy to. Just,
Are we talking Minnesota system, or are we talking national system?
we're talking both, but Minnesota,
Both of them?
Minnesota special. We're working with the Minnesota system. And I'll let
Okay.
Minnesota incarcerates more African Americans per capita outside of California, which is the biggest.
Yes.
Yes, it doesn't, yeah. Per capita now, that makes the difference. I wanted Wayne to explain, we've tried to support this brother. I want him to explain this technical violation that we just tried to help a young man. He just went back to Stillwater Prison. Had a good job, you know, he'd been violated twice, but I'll have Wayne kind of explain that.
Hi, I'm Wayne from Power People Leadership Institute and IWOC and Decarcerate Minnesota, so kind of a coalition. We had a young guy by the name of Kevin. He, about 8 months ago, was technically violated for having pictures of him and his ex-girlfriend on his phone that he was not supposed to have on there, right? So he got out after 6 months, and they gave him back his phone. 2 months later, they just violated him again for the exact same thing. The same phone. So what happened was they gave him back his phone. You know, they got the smartphones now. It was linked to his Gmail account. So the thing was not actually on his phone. It was on his Gmail account. And when they gave him a smartphone, because his crime involved the CSC back, I don't know how many years ago. He was 19, I think. I forget how old exactly he was when it happened. But that's fine. But what had happened was it's a technical violation. He got back the image was on his Gmail account. They gave him his phone. They put monitoring software on the phone, and so if he were to go into his Gmail to access that picture that he wasn't supposed to have on his phone, they would have technically violated him again. So he couldn't go back in to delete it because they would have counted that as him accessing it to violate him. And so what ended up happening was his agent that he has, they have a system called ISR, Intensive Supervised Release, that once certain individuals get out of prison, they are committed to ISR for about a year. And what had happened was his agent, and there are a lot of ISR agents that do not play well within the system. They make up their own rules as they go along. I mean, there's a number of different stories or situations that encompass ISR agents themselves, but basically he got violated for the exact same thing. And now he's spending, as of about a week or so ago, he's spending time in Stillwater for the next 4 months until his sentence expires. So he was already going to be done with everything in 4 months, but instead of putting him on an ankle bracelet or whatever they could have done, his agent decided to push it through to put him back in prison for 4 months. And I don't know what the exact dollar breakdown is for that, but it's going to be spendy for the taxpayer dollar or for taxpayers.
So keep in mind, you know, he was gainfully employed. He was a tax-paying citizen. This happened to me 2 or 3 times where I go in 2 or 3 months, the job is gone, the apartment's gone. So you have to start all over again, you know, and at my age, it's kind of difficult to do. And what happens is that there's housing that you're already barred from getting. And so if somebody is nice enough to rent you a place, I mean, it's doubly hard when you're going back because it freshens all of this stuff. And what happens is that it sets a net drag on the economy because what we're not realizing is I had to go to the county and have them help me get into another place just for the down payment. And that sucks off the economy. And this is going on so routine, you know, that we have blinders on and don't realize that this Holocaust is happening. Like the woman said, it's hidden in plain sight. You know, this stuff is going on every day.
One more thing about Kevin. His crime was a CSC, which stands for criminal sexual conduct. And this was years ago, but you know, he's gone through the process. If you met him, he's smart spoken. He's completely changed his life around to thinking and everything else. But what had happened was he was a level 1 or 2, which is like the lowest you can, even if you're level 2 and 1 are pretty much the same. Level 3 is the ones where they really look at on a daily basis in putting them back in society. Those are the highest level you can get as a risk level for reoffending.
3.
Yeah, 3 is the highest. So he never committed a level 3 crime, but because he went back on that technical violation the first time, they made him a level 3. They automatically boosted his score up to a level 3, which makes housing and employment even harder for him to get. So now when he gets released again, he's gonna have more stipulations on him because of that level 3 thing that he had gotten originally. Now, I know he was working. He had an apartment, so he's lost his apartment. We helped get his stuff out of there a couple days ago, and luckily he's such a good employee at his work that they're willing to take him back, and they're willing to give him a chance at his work again once he gets back on his feet. And he just got a promotion, so that was kind of the hard thing for him to deal with. Yes, sir.
How does he delete the offending pictures without going through this?
So the ISR agent has his password, so they could have deleted that and then given him back his phone, but they left it all connected and then gave him back his phone.
We're gonna get him a new phone.
I got a direct I got a direct answer for you on that. If somebody else goes and does it, then you know, if it gives somebody else his password to get to it that doesn't have any type of restrictions, then they can delete it, and then the ISR agent can give him back his phone with whatever. And now that it's gone, now it's gone. So.
Yeah.
But in his particular case, they would have used it against him for accessing it, no matter who accessed it. His agent's bad.
Well, we can do it right now while he's in.
Well, I've done a fair amount of lobbying, and usually you have to have a fairly simple message, and also a lot of people would do it. So it seems to me that this is called the Department of Correction. And if it's pointed out that this is not really correcting.
Well, you're right.
It's really making it worse. I mean, I think, and then the other thing, as tax-paying citizens, it's perfectly legitimate to argue that this is a terrible waste of money, and that the whole issue of peace in our society, which is what corrections is supposed to make it more peaceful, is not, it's just a terrible waste of money. I heard years ago that there are a lot of prisons set up in the rural areas as money-making places for a
Yes.
small community, which is, I don't know if that's still going on, but I think it's a couple of quick messages about this is not corrections, and we want you
Correct it.
legislators.
Yeah, correct it.
Yeah, correct it, yeah. And the waste of money would be at least some help on. And then maybe, church members could say it's against, mercy and justice.
I believe that this is the start of what we're trying to do. We hit it right on the head.
Let everybody know.
The issues that concern you about this are what we're looking for people to say, okay, you know, I'll work on that piece, right? If the tax issue is the piece that bothers you, the mercy piece is the issue that bothers you, then we can, let's get together, let's sit down, let's find out those strong suits that each of us have. Each of us has a gift or more to be able to, utilize in this issue. This again is a humanity issue. It's not an issue of anything else, race, color, creed. I'm so tired of that. But what the system does, race is handed down by a system. Right? It's passed on like that through a system. Right? So the system has done that. We've got to get the blinders off and say, hey, wait a minute. This is about humanity.
Actually, when you're behind those bars, there's almost not that much of a difference. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Stephen Avery over in Wisconsin. I mean, they treated him so bad. I mean, I think he's been locked up for 2 crimes he didn't commit. But what would you have to say, Ryan?
Goes back to what this young lady was saying and what you touched on earlier. We have been meeting with like the county commissioners to try to end technical violations in Hennepin County. We've met with senators, I think a representative, and as well as the new DOC commissioner. The new DOC commissioner seems committed to change, but we're still working on sitting down and talking through some things. And he said there's going to be some things happening soon, but there's not enough. They always address, pretty much what you hear in the news, people who commit drug crimes and stuff like that, but it has to go way beyond just drug crimes. It has to go and touch every aspect of the criminal justice system, not just one, because that is still holding people behind, that is still locking people up. One of the things that we heard in one of the meetings if per se we let all these technical violators go, what happens to all their funding? They were more worried about getting all this money versus actually correcting the problem. Brother Shane Price had stated, I believe it was New York, I don't know if you heard this one, Phil. New York, they did some type of, it was a long-term study, over 10 years I believe it was, where instead of, what they did with these prisoners was they gave them an education to at least a bachelor's degree. And every single one of those persons, 100% of them, never committed a new crime. Yeah. And they went out into the workforce, they went out and did what they were supposed to do, they were productive citizens, and they turned out good. And if everything was similar to that, of at least that philosophy of education, because education is really important. It's really sad to see, for one of the things that we do with the Power of People, they go into the schools and they teach a course from Dr. Verna Price. And then in the prison systems, Shane takes that same course and goes into the prison systems and teaches that course. It's about personal development and leadership development. And one of the things that I saw as far as reading and listening to some of the essays that happen, the girls are rocking it. The girls are doing what they're supposed to do. And the girls are starting to incline themselves educationally. And some of the guys in some areas, I'm talking about the North Minneapolis area, this is why education is so important. One of the saddest things I saw and heard was a young man's essay to a host family. We sent a number, I think 6 kids from the inner cities overseas to study abroad last season. And the essay that this young man wrote was sad because he couldn't write the essay. It wasn't sad for what he wrote in it, it was just the way it was worded. He really couldn't connect with the host family in his letters. So education is a really, really big, important thing. And if we stressed education more, I feel it would have a really good impact. Not only that, we have to hit this from all angles. So that's one of the things that I liked about what the POP organization is doing. They're hitting it from schools and prisons. So if we can do that collectively as a citizen group, hit it from all different angles, I think would have a greater impact and impact people's lives more positive inside, outside, and in the community. The thing with this system does is it creates fear where fear doesn't really need to be. And people are so afraid of everything that they hear, from what they hear on the news, from what political people are using to get reelected. They're just scaring the public, and they make it so much worse than what it really is.
But, you know, you would just say that about the media, because I'm going to wrap mine up. But remember back in the Reagan era, and they declared war on drugs. Actually, it was Nixon's administration actually did the declaration of war. People don't really realize there was an actual declaration of war. That was war on drugs, right?
Right after our war on poverty, which worked out so well.
So, but you know, when we look at these things, I mean, they're targeted. There's an explicit target for these things, right? What do they target? War on drugs. War on poverty. Well, what's the target? Right? Who got the sentencing?
Yeah.
Crack cocaine versus powder.
Yeah.
Right? You can't make crack without powder. So again, we look at these things, and someone has to stand up. Here's my voice is saying this. If you have whatever you've made your living doing, right? Bring it to the issue. Volunteer your time. It's just 2 hours a month, right? Come give of yourself, because you've been blessed. We've been blessed to be able to make a living, whether it be a teacher, a social worker, a doctor, a lawyer, you know, whatever it is, right? An educator, right? I mean, bring it. Bring it, because we need that, right? We need that. And so my call and my challenge, and it is to really think about this and to educate yourself on these issues. I'm sure we'll meet again on this and maybe see, you know, who all wants to, you know, join us in going. Philip, would you speak on what we're going to be possibly doing with the rally, just the rally?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is have a dual demonstration, and the guys are gonna do some inside. We're gonna try to stage something outside in St. Paul within the next 4 or 5 months. And then we gotta wrap it up though, but there's a scripture that says, many hands make light work. So if anybody wants to sign this, we're more than happy.
The laborers are few, right?
Right.
Harvest is plenty, but the labor. So God is telling me that there's really no unemployment in His kingdom. And it's a funny thing. There's no unemployment in prison either. Everybody has to work.
As we close today, so our leadership council has put together as one of our goals looking at becoming a racially reconciling congregation. And the Minnesota Council on Racial Reconciliation says that is tied to what already exists in the social principles of the United Methodist Church, that we actively be anti-racist. And that's not paying just lip service to it, but actually doing something about it and taking action. And so as we continue to explore that, we certainly appreciate Robert and Philip and Wayne and Joe for coming and sharing their story in a way that we can take action. And so let's join me in giving them a nice round of applause. And we will continue the conversation.